everybody. Welcome back to the Girls Table, a podcast where founders, careers, and investors share their stories. I'm Alana Gold, a partner at Redbeard Ventures, and I will be your host for today. I'm thrilled to have Sophia Amoruso joining me. She is a renowned entrepreneur, best-selling author, and an inspiration to many. She first gained recognition as the founder and CEO of Nasty Gal, an online retailer of trendy and vintage clothing, which started as a small eBay store and grew into a $1 million fashion empire. She raised $60 million in VC funding and grew Nasty Gal to over $100 million in revenue before stepping down as CEO in 2015. Her memoir, #Girlboss, became a New York Times bestseller, empowering entrepreneurs to fearlessly pursue their passions. She went on to build and sell Girlboss Media and currently runs Business Class. Sophia is now the founder and managing partner of Trust Fund, an early-stage venture capital firm focused on pre-seed and seed stage startups. Sophia, welcome to the Girls Table. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's so cool. I'm glad I get to talk to you for an hour. This is awesome.
I know. I'm super excited. I'm glad we've got to meet in person too. I'm also seeing you on Monday. I'm so excited to spend this time with you.
Yeah. Monday, the 26th, right? Is that next?
Oh, so maybe that's 2 weeks.
I think it's in like 2 Mondays.
Okay. I'm super excited though.
Me too. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, you live on a different part of LA, which I feel like I never leave the West Side. So excited to have a reason to go.
Yeah.
I'm going to start off because I think the best way to understand you is to really go back in time. So I want to talk a little bit about growing up. So were you always really into fashion, and did you always want to be an entrepreneur?
No. I wasn't even into fashion when I started a fashion company. I wasn't trying to start a fashion company. I loved clothing and I loved style, but it wasn't even like, wow, I want a career in fashion. It was more just like, oh, wow, I can start an eBay store and sell vintage clothing and I might not have to work for anybody because I'm really bad at that. It wasn't like a career choice. I didn't even know what a career was at that point. But yeah, as a kid, I shopped vintage in like middle school and high school. I remember my mom being like, please, can I just take you to the mall? Like, why are we at this thrift store? I work so hard. Why are we I'm like, Mom, I want like a polyester paisley blouse. Like, come on. But yeah, I like entrepreneurship, yes, but that wasn't really a word. It was more like odd jobs. I had little books called Odd Jobs for Kids that you could like Xerox, had like clip art, and it was like, I can do household tasks and get paid, or like lemonade stand, like weird stuff. Like I think I made brownies and tried to sell it to like neighbors. I had a paper route actually. My dad drove and I just like threw newspapers out the back. That's really funny. I never talk about that.
Oh my God. I did a traveling lemonade stand at one point in my life where instead of just sitting there, I went to my friend's house, took all of their snacks, and then I had this little rolling thing and I like went around and actually sold all their snacks to neighbors. And like as a kid, you didn't want to go and say no to them. So they're like, sure, I'll give you $2 for your friend's food.
Yeah, it's like a Girl Scout it's not doing anybody any good, It's like
Actually, yeah. And then it's crazy because you actually sold your first piece of clothing on eBay back in 2006. So can you talk about that and selling your first piece of clothing?
Yeah. I mean, I got the idea sitting in the lobby of this art school in San Francisco, and I was getting MySpace friend requests from all of these eBay vintage sellers who thought for whatever reason, I might be interested in shopping with them. I don't know if they were just looking at who I was following or what. And I looked at what they were doing and I was like, oh my gosh, I know where to buy this stuff, but this is really expensive. And people were bidding on it. So the auction started at $9.99, but there was a marketplace there of people who were like, duking it out over some, boho hobo bag or whatever was cool at the time. And I was like, wow, I think I can do this. Maybe let's see. And put my first few items up for auction, called it Nasty Gal Vintage, and initially nothing sold. So I thought I was stylish. I had listed my own stuff, but at the end of the day, what I've learned, and hopefully everybody knows about building a business, is that it's not about what you think people want, it's about what they actually want. And I didn't have a like backstop with family money or investors. It was just like, okay, cool. I was iterating, didn't know what that word was either, right? And so I started buying things that were selling for other people, but doing it differently and styling them differently and presenting them differently. And then that just kept evolving. I kept listening and I kept tweaking, and it became like better and better. But the first stuff didn't sell. It was pretty discouraging.
Wow. And how did you motivate yourself to keep going during that? Because I feel like a lot of times with eBay, you're like selling some of your stuff and you're just like, okay, nobody wants this, and would have just given up
Yeah.
before even Nasty Gal became Nasty Gal.
I was unemployed and I think I had time to kill, honestly. There's nothing, there's no better time to start a business when you don't have a lot of responsibilities. I mean, when you're broke, it's hard, but eBay makes that possible for people, and it's so easy to bootstrap a business now. And there's all this amazing software that I'm investing in through Trust Fund that I wish I had to do that, that allows the average person or someone who's not a traditional entrepreneur to start a business. But yeah, I was just like, cool, I'll just give it another shot, I'm resourceful. I love digging. It's what I'm doing with the fund. It's learning how to run a fund. It's all the same stuff. I love learning, and I learn very like tactically, or I don't know what the word is, but
Like
what's
you
the
learn by doing
and
almost.
tangent, yeah, by doing things. And so it was just like a fun. Everything's just a fun education, and I am kind of obsessed with learning and learning how to do things that I'm not traditionally like maybe qualified to do or wouldn't be like hired to do, but like
Yeah.
figure out how to hire myself to do.
I love that. Also, I just want to add that I was back in the eBay days too. My uncle worked and sold dog food, and he got these coupons. And so I would take the coupons that would let you get free dog food, and I would like sell them on eBay. And then my dad also had this building with like all this old ballet slippers and dance stuff, and I would sell them on eBay too. Obviously, did not grow as big as Nasty Gal, but it was so fun watching people bid on things that you were selling during those early days, and
It's such a rush.
I
It
loved it.
is. It's just like, oh my gosh, and like once I left eBay and was selling things through a website, it was like another order. I mean, it's just so exciting, and I still have that feeling like, oh, I got another pitch from a founder or whatever. It's just, when you're in the weeds, you see like every kind of interaction or interest that like a buyer or founder or whatever has, and it's such a thrill in the early days. Um, yeah.
Oh, 100%. So how did you grow Nasty Gal from this like small eBay storefront to ultimately transitioning into one of the top e-commerce sites for women apparel?
Yeah, it was like the fastest growing retailer in the US in
That's
like, I don't
crazy.
remember what year, but yeah, it was pretty wild. I kept listening. eBay was a place that felt very eventually kind of limited, and I realized I was bringing more traffic to eBay than I was getting from them. I had so many repeat customers coming back and bidding on stuff who were super loyal, and I knew they followed me on MySpace. I didn't have a newsletter, but I had this distribution platform on MySpace, and I had sat there and added, I think it was like 60,000 friends, and I had gone and done what people pay a lot of money on, to Meta to do now. There was no real ad targeting on MySpace at the time, but I got this little bot that was like against MySpace's terms, and I would put in, because all the data was like scrapable. It wasn't like an app, like, so I'd put in like person follows Nylon magazine, lives in, Australia and, Denmark or LA or New York, and I think it might have had your age on there. I can't remember, but there was all this stuff I could filter by, and I would sit there, and every like 10 ads, it would make me enter like a CAPTCHA code to prove I was human. Then I would sit there and it would like add 10 more, and I'd have to like enter a CAPTCHA code, and I did that so much. So after about a year and a half, year one was 75K, which was like, I was rich. To me, I didn't spend any of the money. I was just like, I didn't have expensive taste, at least, like, maybe I did like somewhere kind of hidden. Um, and then year two was 250K. And that year was half eBay, and then I had left eBay, which was dangerous because there was no traffic to this website. I just made a website on nastygalvintage.com. I had a high school friend like slap together a Photoshop file that I had made, having never used Photoshop before. And at the time, there was no Shopify. You had to slice up Like he had to slice the add to cart button and like hard code it onto the page. Like it was
There
such
was no Squarespace.
no, no. I mean, I think yeah, one of them's been around for a long time, but was not like, there was no Shopify, there was no Squarespace, there was no Stripe, there were no APIs, like, there was no Zaps. Like, it was like
Yeah.
webhooks. I don't know. Like, I was uploading things to like FTP servers. Um, and decided to leave, announced on MySpace, I launched my website, never went back to eBay. It was just this hard transition, and everything sold out in the first 24 hours. Who, What, Where, which was really big at the time, media company, sent out a dedicated newsletter about it. I didn't pitch them. I didn't know what publicists were. I was up in the Bay Area. I was in Benicia, which is like by Vallejo. I was like deep in like the East Bay, in this little shipyard in like this drafty 1,000 square foot space. And it sold out, which had never happened before because on eBay I had 10 days for the auction to run. It was like, oh, cool. And I had 10 days to prep the next batch of auctions. When you have one of a kind things and they sell out, you've got an empty store. And it was like, oh my gosh, wow, this isn't going to scale. And I was like so overwhelmed with shipping. It was just, I mean, it was the best, but I think I got sick. What was I going to say? I don't know. I mean, I was shipping everything, shooting everything, steaming everything, writing all the product descriptions, doing all the customer care, weighing the stuff, like
Yeah, there was no chat GBT back then where you could
sourcing
be
the
like,
products. There was no like anything back then. This is like 2007, 2008. And so I realized, wow, okay, not like I want to scale this, but it was more like if I want to keep stuff in stock, I might need to have more than one of them. And heard about this trade show called Magic in Las Vegas, a big apparel trade show. It happens twice a year, and went and bought like a few pieces in like one small, one medium, and one large. And then I could take a photo and write a product description and sell three things. The margin was still pretty high. It wasn't as high as vintage, but it's like in terms of, my time, the margin eventually became much higher revenue. It was allowed me to scale. And so I didn't know what pivoting was. I didn't know what scaling was. It was just like I had kind of beta tested what my audience wanted and just knew very, I guess, like understood very deeply what it was that they wanted to buy because I had seen every single thing sell and started buying stuff. And again, like anything else, stopped buying what didn't work and kept buying things or things similar to what did work. And eventually that really scaled the business, was curating things from other brands. So, and still selling vintage. So year 3 was 1.1 million.
wow.
Year 4 was 6.5. 1.1, 6.5, 12. And that was entirely bootstrapped. And we were on our way to 28. Cash flow positive, no investors, no debt. I had to buy cars cash. I had to buy like my Nissan Murano cash.
Oh. And then you actually did raise VC funding though, because you raised $60 million in VC funding between 2012 and 2015.
Yeah, so in 2012, VCs started crawling out of the woodwork, and I was like, how are they finding me? What is this? I didn't know how people in San Francisco afforded it because I was in the city before I was in had to move out to the East Bay to have more space, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. I guess I'll talk to them. And it was kind of a freak show to them because it's rare to find someone with a company that's growing at a venture pace without venture money behind them, who's profitable and just kind of like hiding out, and also not a traditional entrepreneur. Just kind of did it out of the back of my car in spirit, for so many years. And that's when in 2012, I had moved the company to LA. I had moved like 14 employees to LA, to downtown LA. We had a little office space. I kept the fulfillment center in this like warehouse. At that point, I had a little warehouse up in Emeryville, and met Jeff Jordan from Andreessen, met Jeremy Liu from Lightspeed, met Danny from Index, and that was in 2012. Jeff and Jeremy are both LPs in Trust Fund, which is awesome. And, those are relationships that are 12 years old now. So, and ultimately Index invested and Thrive invested. So I met Josh Kushner in 2012 and Will Gabrick, who's at Stripe now, pretty much running the show. And they were partners at Thrive. And so they put $1 million. Index put in like 48 or something like that. And we raised the first money into Nasty Gal out of a growth fund. And we were on our way to 28 million in revenue, and they valued us at 350 million post. I owned 80% of the company when it was worth valued at $350 million. It was totally weird. Such a shock to the system, and also life-changing.
Yeah, and what were some of the challenges you faced? Because I feel like now you're obviously on the other side of the house, but that was somewhere where you never raised VC funding. This was like really hot in the time in SF, and they're coming up to you and they're asking you, was there any challenges like during that process that you remember that now you kind of keep in mind while you're talking to founders?
I didn't know I was like a 10x, valuation was insane. Because I didn't run a process. The only time I talked about valuation was when I was like, cool, I like you, Danny, at Index, you get it. This is a community. That's what he said. You're building a community. And I was like, awesome, you get it. Great, I pick you. And when we talked about valuation, we just kind of like haggled. Like I didn't know. It was just like, how this much for that much? What about this much for that much? Okay, cool. And like got off the phone. My advice for founders is, go get more experience than I did before you raise money. Work at a company, at least have experienced like leadership, work in an office of some kind before your name is on the lease of it. I've only worked in offices my name was on the lease of. I was working at shoe stores and record stores and photo labs and art school lobbies before this. And I was really at a disadvantage, as serendipitous and unlikely and American dream kind of story as it is. I wasn't equipped to scale a company, and especially to scale a venture-backed company with expectations that in the next year we were going to go from 28 million to 128 million. I hired a COO, super experienced in commerce at the time. I had my one board member, Danny. I had 2 seats. He had 1, and mine was the second one of mine was empty like the whole time. I didn't build out a helpful board. So one piece of advice is build out a helpful board or advisors. I'm an advisor in a lot of my portfolio companies, and was to a lot of my angel investments. And there are people who can be really helpful. And be careful with valuation. It was an interesting kind of speculative time. Fab.com was hot shit, which was like so long ago. And Jeff Jordan had invested in Fab, and they eventually imploded not long after I had raised money. So even the examples at the time became not examples, and investor interest in fashion commerce shifted. So when you raise at a high valuation and things change, you're kind of fucked. So whether it's investor, the market changing like it has in the last, year or two, where founders were raising at 70 million, $100 million valuations with like $1 million ARR or less. And
Crazy.
Then investors saying like, oh, actually, we want you to be profitable. This makes sense at 15 post, and you can't raise. You're doing down rounds, you're recapitalizing the company. That sucks. And similarly, I raised at too high of a valuation. I didn't really know that. And it was like a hype cycle. It wasn't even really that much of a hype cycle. It was just e-commerce was still very nascent. Fashion e-commerce was still very nascent. And the sentiment shifted. So there's the sentiment around valuations that can shift for all startups and will for everyone. And there's also, investors focus shifts in terms of like, no, we're interested in consumer software, not consumer products. And then like that trend changes, and your ability to fundraise is a lot harder because, you're not the trendy sector that everybody was looking at a few years prior. So, you know, and that all boils down to, I think, valuation. And it's much easier to get people to invest after others when you're not in valuation purgatory, which I didn't know I was for, years after I took $50 million in 2012.
Wow. And also, I feel you in the sector and kind of being in that hype. I mean, we have a Web3 crypto fund and then generalist syndicate, and our fund, like, talk about being in the hype back in 2021 and then where we are at right now. So definitely very like valuation cautious. And I think a lot of companies are realizing that, hey, they raised at this crazy valuation and now they can't raise at it right now. But so what ultimately led to you stepping down Nasty Gal as CEO in 2015? And how was it leaving this company that began as an eBay store in 2006, was there for 9 years building this every single night, every single day, and then going and starting something new?
It was a relief. I mean, I didn't start anything new until like after 2016. So, yeah, early 2015, I think I just was not interested in CEOing. I was like, I didn't know this was what my job was going to look like as a founder. As your company grows, you have a different job every year. And it's hard to write your job description. You're doing what the company needs you to do. Maybe I could have delegated better. I did have a great executive team, but holding C-level executives accountable, I was out of my league. I also didn't enjoy it. And I didn't need to read a P&L for the first like several years of the business because it was throwing off a ton of money. I was just like, don't spend more than you're making. And there was, I don't think there's like a holiday season in, I don't know what year, maybe 2010, where I had saved $1 million in a Wells Fargo account.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just like cash sitting there. And there's a screenshot also because I banked with them personally, and I had like, is it like maybe 8,000 in my personal account, something like that. Like I didn't really pay myself, or I wasn't doing anything other than working. So eventually, the things I enjoyed, I had hired other people to do. The things I love are being scrappy, being on the ground, sourcing product, styling, photography, design, marketing. And I was then managing teams to do that, which I just enjoyed. I didn't enjoyed less, like so much less. And thought, okay, well, maybe I should hire a CEO. And nobody pushed me to, everyone, Danny was like, well, I don't think you should, but if you want to, great, I support you. And I did. I stepped out of I was still in an operational role in terms of, creative. I was still overseeing a lot, but I don't think creative was reporting up to me. I think I was still very active, but not in I didn't have like a bunch of reports, which was kind of a dream to me. It was a relief. But also, hiring a CEO is like it's a risky thing. You don't know if someone's going to be a great CEO for your business until they're the CEO of your business. And ultimately left Nasty Gal at the end of 2016. So I hadn't been the CEO for the last 2 years that I was at Nasty Gal. But yeah, really enjoyed working with the woman that I hired. She's amazing. She had been the chief product officer at Lululemon. And in terms of like product being like the apparel, helped kind of revolutionize like the fabric, like the stuff we still love about Lululemon leggings, as like much as, people want to like knock Lulus or whatever. I wear them.
Oh,
And
I'm wearing them right now and
really,
actually just
yeah,
bought
she
this
had
pair of a
like,
line.
really innovated on product, was incredible, like merchant, incredible leader of the design team, but hadn't been a CEO before. Um, and like even then, as the chairman, my job is still to hold a CEO accountable, and I was so far out of my league, even trying to replace myself as a CEO.
Wow. And I'm just wondering because this was like first time founder, never expected to grow this to as big as you did. What was the scrappiest thing that you did as a founder that you remember?
I mean, counting inventory in the warehouse at, midnight when, our systems like broke and we were overselling stuff because the numbers were wrong and people were buying things that were out of stock, and had to go through that. Like, that was once we were in LA. That was, after we were doing a significant amount of revenue. I mean, I think on eBay, I had, it was amazing. I spent a lot of time in thrift stores and spent so much time in them that at the Goodwill near where I lived, which was in Pleasant Hill, also East Bay, moved way out there, to like start this thing and have space to like put, shipping stuff in my car and like park my car in front of my house so I could take things to the post office. Was there for hours, and the women who worked there, they would have like new stuff. And they had like literally grocery store shopping carts they'd bring out with piles of new stuff, each of them on hangers. And they'd go put like, the jackets in one area, and then they'd put like, shirts, whatever, dresses in another. And when they walked away to go put stuff away, I'd go flip through it before like anybody saw it. It was like a freak. And one time it was like flip, 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 and it was like a Chanel jacket, and then it was like flip, flip, and it was like another Chanel jacket. And I was like, holy shit. They were $8
Oh my God.
each. And I put them on eBay, sold one of them for over $1,000. And and afterwards I was like, I'm gonna, this is gonna be the perfect, this has to be pristine for this woman. She was in like the UK. And I took it to the dry cleaner, the local dry cleaner. And when I went to pick it up, it was like almost like a military style, like peacoat with like gold buttons, like a peacoat, but a fitted one, kind of peacoat style anyway. Big gold, like Chanel buttons. And they had lost one of the buttons. And I had already sold this thing. And so I didn't know what the back of like the inside of dry cleaning machines look like. I did work in a dry cleaner in high school, but I never looked inside of the machines. And it was nowhere. It wasn't under the machines. It completely vanished. And I didn't know what to do. I had never been to a Chanel store. I never even wanted Chanel. I didn't give a shit about Chanel. I still don't really. And called the Chanel store in like Beverly Hills. I've never been to Beverly Hills. Here I am in Benicia. And I say, like, I have this button, like, do you know where I can find another one? And they were like, we have an archive. Will you send us, we cut off another button and mail it to us so we can match it. And I was like, oh my God, I'm cutting another button off this jacket. And now this, I have to tell the customer that it's delayed. Not sure I want to tell her why. And they match the button and they send it to me. I put the button back, ship it to her. She's very happy. But yeah, I think like putting my head inside of a dry cleaning machine might have been the scrappiest thing I did. But it's
Yeah.
like I went to like rag houses to shop for vintage at giant warehouses. I had like black boogers when I left, and my fingernails were black, and my cuticles were torn up. I was pulling snot rags out of like dead ladies ponchos before I sold them. I mean, it was all very scrappy for a very long time.
Yeah, and I mean, I think all your experiences as a founder helps you and just makes you a better investor than where you are right now. So I want to fast forward, because then you launched Girlboss in 2017. You built this community and media platform for women. So can you talk about what made you really decide to do this and why you really wanted to resonate with young women and help them become girl bosses?
Totally. Yeah, I had written this book, Girlboss, in 2014. And it, spent 18 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list and sold 500,000 copies. And it was just this crazy runaway hit. I thought it was content marketing. I was like, okay, I got the logo of Nasty Gal on a cover of a book that was in every bookstore and airport in the country. I thought we'd sell a ton of dresses. We sold books. It sold books, and it built this like girl boss conversation. I don't know, people called it like a movement. Women were so inspired to see someone like me, who's a community college dropout from Sacramento, like start a thing. It was a year after Lean In had come out. And at this point, there was Etsy, there were all these other platforms for people to start businesses and become an entrepreneur. And yeah, it struck a chord. And so eventually the girl boss conversation became bigger than Nasty Gal in a weird way. It was, my company was doing over 100 million in revenue, but here I am with this like book and this hashtag that's like exploding. 22 million hashtag uses on Instagram. I don't know which year it was, but it was nuts. And at the end of 2016, Nasty Gal ended for me. We had a hard time continuing to fundraise for obvious reasons. So I left, I stepped off the board and was like, okay, Hillary just lost. Girl Boss is like jamming. I am not employable. This is great IP. This is what is waiting for me. I had a podcast that I had started in 2015 called Girlboss Radio. So I announced on Instagram, like, hey, if I did a conference, would you join? And then put together a little Squarespace website and was like, okay, I'm doing a conference, here's tickets. And so sold out in, I don't know, like a couple weeks, 500 tickets, and then was like, oh shit, I have to do this. Did it. This was now, I left Nasty Gal in November of 2016. This is now March of 2017. Shopify sponsored it, Bumble sponsored it, like Kevin Systrom from Instagram came down and spoke, Emily Weiss and Jen Rubio and like Tyler Haney from Glossier and Outdoor Voices and Away. So it was like, it just like landed and people were stoked on it. So I'd initially bootstrapped it and then decided to raise a little bit of money from Initialized when Alexis Ohanian was there and Gary Tan was there, and then also Lightspeed. So Lightspeed, Nicole Quinn at Lightspeed led our, I guess it was pre-seed, seed round later in 2017.
And then you eventually got acquired by Attention Capital in 2019.
Yeah, which was very good timing because COVID happened after that. So events still wasn't good timing. It's never good timing when COVID hits and your business is not can no longer do events. Brand partners who are a large part of our revenue are pulling out of things they've committed to because who's gonna, push some jolly campaign when a pandemic is emerging. It's like, brands have to be sensitive. We couldn't host events. And we tried to do like a digital Girl Boss rally. That didn't pan out. But at the end of 2019, I had known back to the end of 2019, I had met Joe Marchese, who is also an LP and trust fund, who had built an ad tech company, exited to Fox, and was building kind of like a roll-up vehicle called Attention Capital in 2019 with Nick Bell, who was the head of product at Snap. And it's amazing what can transpire years after meeting someone. No reason to, have a relationship, really liked him, wasn't a transactional thing, and then, many years later, he's acquiring my company. I think it just, goes to say that the people you network with today could be really significant in your career 5 or 10 years from now, and you just never know.
Oh, it's so true. I always say your network is your net worth, and you never know who you can meet and the effect that they could have on you.
It's true. Like, I knew Jeff Jordan, and he was like a mentor, but that was it. Like, I wasn't asking for much from him for the last, 12 years, and then I was like, I have a fund, and he invested. Like, that's awesome. And it's just because of relationship building and goodwill, and, it takes time to do that.
Yeah. And so you got acquired. 2020, you launched Business Class, an online course for entrepreneurs. And then right now you're doing Trust Fund, which is an early stage fund focused on consumer startups. So why go into VC versus operating a company, given that you've already been such a serial entrepreneur?
I'm not good at it. I don't like it. I like starting things. I don't like scaling operations. So Trust Fund, I can do nimbly, even with a $30 or $50 million fund with probably less than 10 people, or with the $30 million fund, like less than 5 for sure. I can't afford probably more than 2 or 3. But I am still very scrappy. I like being in the weeds. I don't like delegating. I love working with founders. So I invested over $1 million into over 20 companies as an angel through like mostly in 2020, 2021. Somehow they weren't super overvalued. I invested in Liquid Death at 50 post. They're at
Oh,
700 now. I
yeah, we
invested,
did secondary at the basically 700. So,
yeah.
mhm.
You bought secondary.
Yeah, we bought them through our syndicate.
I sold secondary.
We were probably the one who purchased it.
So I've
So,
got like DPI on the books. I did that with Kindbody too. As an angel, I didn't know that was important. I didn't know what, you know, DPI was, and now having that in my deck is, I guess, impressive. It's awesome. And just, I was like, I had started Business Class, which was an online course for founders, mostly bootstrap founders. That has since that is bootstrapped. I have one employee with Business Class. It's like a relatively automated online course and membership at businessclass.co, and that has since pulled in like 5 million in revenue, and that's kind of like over here. But I just love working with founders, and that's one way I can do it. But I know I can also help venture backed founders, and I do believe that some companies are venture backable. I don't think most of them are. It's glamorous, but most people shouldn't. Most businesses don't need to and shouldn't raise venture capital. But the ones that can and should, I can help a lot with in a different way than I can with a bootstrap founder, because I've seen it all. I've seen like the guts, as you've heard, of being inside of a venture backed business, and decided I wanted to make it my job. And I enjoy it more than anything. I mean, the beauty of having spent, I don't know what, since 2006, how many years, 15, 16, I don't know, math, building businesses and having these relationships, being the runoff of that being like, oh, I can make an intro that's really high value, or oh, I can amplify this founder's company on social channels of like 1 million or something, like, and to an audience that's interested in the kinds of products I'm investing in. So decided to start a $5 million fund. I was like, I'm not gonna go nuts here. I'm gonna start where I feel comfortable playing. I'm gonna write 250K checks. I know I can get that kind of allocation as a collaborative investor. I don't want to lead. I don't want to take board seats. I won't be with Fund 2 either. Fund 2 will be larger whenever that happens. But sent an email out to my network, and by the end of 2022, David Sachs and Jeff Jordan, Jeremy Liu, and Jason Calacanis, and Mark Andreessen, and Chris Dixon, Andrew Chen, Ev Williams, Anthony Noto from SoFi, Rob Hayes from First Round, like all these men.
it's true
That's
though.
that's who I met 12, 14 years ago. I mean, that's who was there, right? Like,
Yeah.
also Jesse Draper and Naomi Gleit from Facebook. Some awesome women invested. Heather from Human Ventures. And so that was with some emails. And then in January of 2023, decided to talk to TechCrunch and do a public fundraise. And that was when Trust Fund started making noise. And I feel like we've been making a lot of noise since
Oh, I
then.
feel like I see it everywhere.
That's
So,
amazing. That's amazing.
yeah, I also would agree with in terms of not having as many women LPs. I mean, I think we have 4 out of 91, like something crazy like that. And in our syndicate, we have 4,100 LPs. I've seen like 20 maybe women, and that's like, it's crazy.
I mean, there are great platforms being started for angel investing. Um, One's being incubated. I don't know if I can talk about it. And then another one's called Cherub. I don't know if you've heard. They're local. It's Jacqueline Johnson, who did Create and Cultivate. So they're creating a platform. They're raising money. So there are people who are attracting women to angel invest directly, but being like fund LPs is a different thing. I have a lot of small checks from women, because when I announced in TechCrunch that I was raising a $5 million fund and had these like highfalutin LPs, I also said I'm taking applications for anybody to write checks between 2 and 20K into the fund. I'm reserving $1 million of allocation for accredited investors to apply. And so I got like 600, I got like over $6.5 million in applications.
Oh
I
my
can't take more than like 99 accredited investors, I think.
goodness.
And it was, heads of product at, public companies and some really impressive people that it took a ton of time to go through, but was able to then, because my audience is largely women, maybe not well-known women, bring in folks who could be helpful, strategic to portfolio companies, may have their own platforms to amplify the companies I'm investing in, and also are able to become LPs in a fund when typically very few people are invited to be LPs in funds. And so that was really, really fun to kind of democratize that and also bring in another layer of help for my portfolio founders, people who are, over 100 LPs now, who are really stoked to, be part of trust fund and help build it along with me.
Yeah, and I think just given that you've had so much experience really operating, is there anything, because now you're getting pitched all day, every day, and is there anything specific that you look for in founders or in a startup that really helps them stand out? And yeah, anything specific that you want to see as founders continue to pitch you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not investing in community college dropouts from Sacramento, as cute as that was, unless they've already built something like massive and have proven themselves and ideally exited. Like, I don't want to invest in someone who could follow my trajectory because I couldn't figure it out. I don't want to help them figure it out, and they're total outliers. Um, and that sounds really snobby, but I'm gonna ride on the coattails of people with really expensive educations or people who have spent years, employed in a startup, getting their chops, or have built venture-backed businesses or been in startups, because building a venture-backed company is very different than building a bootstrap business. So folks who have, it's awesome when they've built companies before, spent time at, great technology companies, have experienced the problem that they're working on solving, have an interesting way of having landed on it, are killers. I like put this in my deck, but I feel like I want to put it in more places. But I was like, I love copywriting, and I wrote killers building painkillers. Like build a painkiller, not a vitamin, kind of thing. So people who are just like, you know, stoked and strong and gonna like really, really do it even when it gets hard. Um, Always a technical co-founder if they're building software, which every company I've invested in is, and has even at pre-seed, even though I don't do much pre-seed, it's mostly seed with trust fund, has some concept of go-to-market or what their wedge or unique advantage is, unfair advantage, which I think a few years ago no one was asking about go-to-market for a company that was raising money, at the pre-seed stage, but that's become more important to venture investors over the last year, and it's one of the biggest questions I've been told to ask from the awesome GPs that I know who've done this job a lot longer than me.
Yeah, and I think I just want to end on two more questions, but you're obviously focused more heavily on technology that helps businesses grow and scale. So, is there any thesis within that that you're really excited about because that or that you think was really needed that you're looking for right now?
Yeah. So it's pretty broad. I'm investing in products that help people start and build businesses, largely products that I wish I had when I was building Nasty Gal, rubbing two sticks together, um, or products that can create entrepreneurs, that can help anybody become an entrepreneur. And that can be marketplaces, it could be labor marketplaces, it could be peer to peer because people are renting things and selling things, and that's a business. So I invested in Toothio, which is a dental labor marketplace, which allows dental workers, hygienists, dental professionals to book shifts with dental offices and for dentists to fill shifts. And that software, I mean, they're doing really well. That software is just the App Store, and that software allows someone, mostly women, to work for themselves for the first time just because of that software. Like that is, I understand eBay, that was the power of eBay for me. And I understand, like, it makes me so excited to know that there's so many other ways for people to start businesses or work for themselves, whether it could be freelance or really, starting something they have ambitions to make large. I invested in Plot, which is a project management platform for creatives, because I'm dense. A sauna looks like the inside of a data room to me, or like the inside of a server room. So it's like products that help demystify business ownership, managing a business, funding your business. It's pretty broad, but largely democratize business ownership and entrepreneurship for both freelancers and also founders who are building, eventually large businesses.
Well, Sophia, I'm going to end on one final question. I've really just enjoyed having you on the Girls Table. I think your story is truly inspirational. But I want to end with, is there any advice you have for the people listening today that you wish your younger self knew?
I'm still trying to learn it, but it's just be patient. Like, be patient. Things take time. I think everybody thinks they need to be on the Forbes 30 under 30 or, a star early on. It was great to be like, it's great to be considered precocious. You kind of tap out at like 30, you're no longer impressive for your age. And it's very cool to be impressive for your age in your 20s. But that's not what success looks like. And I think, I think as fun as the victory lap was with Nasty Gal and Girlboss, I think it was a little bit distracting. So, if you're building something, if you have goals, like, make sure that's what you're spending your time on. And if you're doing external things, like, don't be enamored by the glamour. Do things for the right reasons and keep your head down and just execute.
Awesome. Sophia, thanks so much for joining today. I'm so happy that I got to share your story. If anybody wants to follow you along, where can they follow you? I know you're on Twitter, Instagram.
Yeah.
What's the best place?
All the social platforms, LinkedIn and Twitter, I publish a lot. Instagram, just Sophia Amoruso, Amoruso, trustfund.vc. You can do trustfund.vc/pitches. And then my website is, businessclass.com. But I'm about to pitch an LP, an institutional LP right now, and I'm a minute late.
Okay,
So,
go enjoy it. So,
all
sorry,
right.
wishing you
Okay,
luck.
thank you so
Bye.
much. I'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.